So grateful to be here and very happy to discuss these incredibly important and hard to talk about topics. He has an incredible backbone and staggering moral fiber. Howie is totally committed, completely ethical, totally admirable. No pressure if you can hear this, but honestly, Howie's a hero to me.
John, you joined us before, and it was pretty incredible kind of testimony you gave, and you just devoted your life to advocacy for child trafficking, and even 9/11 truth. Maybe you could explain to us, in the last decade, what do you think the most challenging parts of coming alive on some of these issues have been?
Probably the hardest thing, and it continues, is just realizing that pretty much everything that I was told and taught since I was in grade school is probably not true. And hello, good evening, and welcome. There's nothing like cutting it close. Welcome to the Traffic Report. Howie will be along directly. He's in transit at the moment. We're very excited this evening. This is probably our fifth survivor story, I think. I've had the chance to get to know Catherine, and she is a survivor of child sexual abuse. She's 58 years old. She's been through an incredible journey from the age of 4 years old, being sexually abused by babysitters, a babysitter's husband. And she's been fighting sexual predators her entire youth and was able to escape that hell. I don't think there's any other word for it. And I'm just very excited to have her on the show. Howie is, and he'll be joining us shortly. But just welcome, Catherine, to the Traffic Report. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, John. I appreciate it. I appreciate being able to add whatever that I can to what is going on right now with the whole subject of childhood sexual abuse. And thank God that the whole subject has broken wide the way that it has. And so Howard and I have talked about that quite a bit because this is unprecedented, for sure. And to watch all of the celebrities in Hollywood start selling each other out right and left, well, it's like
rats
every day.
Rats leaving the sinking ship, and there's going to be a lot more. And yeah, that is such a salient point, an ascension point, I think is what I meant to say, but a good point. Let me just try English, simple English. It's a great point. I think Howie's beaming in right now. So I hear something.
So okay, hold and accept.
Hold and accept. I think I got UC Radio on hold, so. Are you there, Howie? Just give us a second here. It's not. All right, I think we're back on the air here, and we're going to hang this call up. Got to
John,
add UCY and Catherine.
UCY is now added.
Okay, so I guess we're back on the air.
Yeah, sorry about that. I apologize for running late.
Okay, it looks like Catherine's beaming in. I need to accept, or
I'm adding her to the call right now. Okay. She just left. I don't know. She's not picking up. Let me see how we want to do this.
Howie, she's on another. Are you on the call, Catherine?
No, she's not.
She's on the other part of the call that I'm on. I've got her held, but I can't merge the calls. So.
Well, you have to hang up that call.
All right.
I apologize to everyone.
You there, Howie?
Yep.
Okay, try to add her to the call.
Added her to the call.
Okay.
Hi, Catherine.
Speaker on.
I think we made it.
My goodness. All right.
I that is completely my fault. I'm running about 10 minutes late, and we usually get this done. So I apologize, but we can get off and running.
It's only 12:07, so you're really not that late. We're having a nice little conversation, and now that we've got our technical problems ironed out, we were talking about how the atmosphere has changed in child sex trafficking and sexual assault in the workplace. It's been a seismic shift in about 6 months. I mean, I remember when we started the show, and it was like we were talking to the wilderness. And so,
did you get into the early years when Catherine was on?
I had just basically introduced Catherine and gave a little bit of her history and thanked her for being on the show. So that's kind of where we're at. So
if I could give my little introduction, I mean, I met Catherine on Twitter, probably November of 2016, maybe early. Yeah, probably. Yeah, she was one of the first people that I came across. And one day we were just talking, and I remember it distinctly. And I was like, "Hey, you want to talk on the phone?" And she was like, "Sure," and we just ended up talking, and she let me know a little bit about herself, and she let me know about this girl from England, and we've been friends ever since. And she's always been behind the scenes, but I think it's about time we have her a little more in the forefront. And I consider her a friend, and I love her to death. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
Okay.
Well, Howard is family, really. He's a little bit more than a friend, but it's a pretty funny mix, I think, Howard. And the way that I found Howard is because he was the sign holder in front of Comet Pizza, and the person he was holding that sign in front of Comet Pizza, and I thought to myself, I'll never find him. And then I did. I couldn't believe it. So anyway.
Yeah, I can't even remember how I found Howie. But it was through Twitter, and Elle was involved, and then UCY Radio came along, and it's been quite a journey and very rewarding.
Yeah,
look at these little things, and look at these personalities that pulled these things out of their hat to do, and the impact that it's made. how many people have seen that sign in front of Comet Pizza, and then the following signs, and then, TMZ, and then I have lost track of who all has profiled Howard.
Yeah.
I mean,
And actually,
as much as I would love to hear you talk about how wonderful I am, I want to hear about you.
Yeah, we know that already, Catherine. So,
but the point being is that it's the thing that you think of. Like, I thought of Twitter. I thought of Twitter from the beginning when I first started it. I thought, well, shoot, I could use this for a lot of things. And so I started using it for the childhood sexual abuse. And I connected with Lori Handren and, the different ones and stuff like that. And so...
And let me just finish up because technical difficulties kind of shortened my introduction. But what I had at the end of that introduction was, and really the most exciting, it's a very exciting thing for me is knowing that you assisted Becky, and everybody knows Becky was the first survivor to share her story, Becky Piercy on the Traffic report. Riveting. And I'm sure I'm just honored to know that you were able to help Becky get out of that situation that she was in. She's a force to be reckoned with, and I have no doubt that you're a force to be reckoned with. So with that, I'm going to shut up, and I want to hear your story. We'll only interrupt if we can think of a few intelligent questions. So the floor is yours, Catherine.
Okay, well, really... I did want to share this before I started with my own personal story. And I was talking with you guys before the show. And I saw this on the ID channel. And I wanted to share this because this is public and this is going to help somebody. This is going to help a child because some adult is going to tell a child. And it's just going to get out. But so... it was a story that I saw profiled on the ID channel, and it was a man whose daughter had been kidnapped and murdered and, sexually assaulted, of course. And so this was in the days when they were starting to put the children's pictures on the milk cartons, and she was one of the first ones to go on the milk cartons. And the father was in the forefront. He was seen with the milk cartons, and he was went around to schools and different organizations, and he was big on, what had happened to his daughter. Well, they never solved the murder of his daughter, and then I believe it was the cold case files that reopened it, and when they were reviewing the evidence, they found the daughter's diary. And in the daughter's diary, she had written that her father had been molesting her and that day she was going to tell him, no more, you're not going to do this to me ever again. And that was the day that she was murdered. And so then they brought him in, and then he confessed to it after that. But the point being is that child had written in her diary about her father, and other children can do the same thing. Many times whenever there's the situation of a sexual assault, a child sexual assault, it's the adult against the child, their word. Well, if a child will write little bits and pieces of notes, put them in different places so where they can be collected, it's evidence. Children, it is evidence. Adults, it is evidence. Tell the children. It will help them. It's gonna help a child somewhere.
Yeah. And talk and listen to your children. You know, that's I think the most powerful message that we get across and that survivors get across is people come forward. Okay, it's okay now. We know that this happened to you. We believe what you're telling us, and you're going to be supported. And talk with your children about these things. And we encourage anybody that's been a victim of this and is now and if you survive it, you're a survivor. But come forward, and there is no statute of limitations on these cases. You know, the rape of a child, can be prosecuted, even if it happened 20 years ago, even if it happened 30 years ago, and that is starting to happen.
That actually depends on state to state. California, I think the way that their statute reads is when the adult recalls that they were molested, they have a certain amount of years after they have that recollection.
Yes, that is true. Yeah.
Something like that. But, well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about with my own personal story is how I acted out as a child. And it totally destroyed the relationship that I ever might have had with my mother. And we never had one. And my mother passed. There's never going to be one. But how I acted out, because I didn't know how to say, anything. I didn't know how to say I was being sexually molested. I didn't know really what was happening to me. I was so little. But so I did say that piece about, children, if you're being harmed, make little notes, stash them, keep them, use them. So anyway, my own story, I was born in Texas and raised in Oklahoma. At the age of 4, we moved to Oklahoma to a small town called Seminole, and the population is around 7,000. And so when I was young, my parents divorced, and so my mom was a single parent. And she had 4 little kids. Well, she worked as a waitress, and she worked a split shift in the morning and at night. So we went to the babysitters in the morning and at night. And it was the babysitter's husband that molested me and everybody else that came within, 100-mile radius of him, pretty much, probably. He and his wife, his name was Melvin, and his wife's name was Cora, and they had 3 daughters of their own. And I know that he molested all of them.
Oh my gosh.
But they were teenagers when I was young. And so it was me, and I had a sister that was 2 years younger than me. And then I had 2 brothers. And my brothers have never said that they were molested, but I kind of think they probably were, because that man was so gross. If you were to go and look in an encyclopedia for what the stereotypical child molester would look like, his picture would be there. He had no teeth, and his gums and his lips were all sunken in from having no teeth for years, and, little spurts of hair around his, bald head. He always had the filthiest clothes on. So he was a painter/fisherman. He never painted anything, and he never fished, but the garage was where he did all the harm. He would go and, pretend to do fishing things, make fishing lures, and, do y'all know what stink bait is?
Yes, I actually do. Philly, so I don't know if you.
Being a Jewish kid from Northeast Philadelphia, no, I don't know what stink bait is.
I'm a Florida boy, so yeah, I know what it is.
So you know what it smells like. That garage reeked of stink bait all the time. He reeked of stink bait all the time. And so what I remember in the beginning was being out in the backyard, and he had built a fire, and they had chickens and everything. And so he was going to kill a chicken. Well, he made me go out there, and the other little kids too. But I was his focus. And
Catherine, how old were you at the time?
I was probably around 5 now. I was probably about 5 around this time. And I know that
I'm sorry, but your mom, it was like a neighbor who your mom used to babysit?
No, he was the babysitter's husband.
The babysitter's husband.
Oh, okay.
Right, the babysitter's husband. And so there were me, and I had 3 siblings that went to the same babysitter. Then I had a friend. She and I went to the same babysitter from the time we were 4 years old. And she and her sister, she had a sister that was 2 years younger than she was. Now,
Catherine, did you say this guy's name was Melvin, correct?
Melvin Green, huh?
Melvin Green. Okay. And was he ever prosecuted for any of this?
No.
Wow. And I just got a chill when you said Melvin, because I don't know if you remember this, but there was I think it was an HBO documentary called Just Melvin, and it was about a guy in Florida, and they were like carny type people, and he molested. I think he had 4 or 5 daughters, and they just went through and told the story of how he molested all of them. And I just got a chill when you said that name, but I don't know if you find that on YouTube. I think it's still around, but it's just another similar story.
Horrific.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I just can't paint a repulsive enough picture of this man. And so anyway, the way that he, like...
I'll just interrupt you for a second, Howie. I don't know if you can hear this, but we're getting a lot of background from somewhere. I can keep hearing background noise. Sorry to interrupt you, Catherine. I just want I don't know. Yeah,
I'm not hearing it. I mean, it's a little staticky. Catherine, can you get closer to your phone?
Yeah, it's just like papers moving or some sort of movement or something. I don't know what it is, but I keep hearing it, so I just want to let you guys know.
Can you hear me fine now?
I can hear you good, Catherine. I'm not sure if it's coming from your end or Howie's end, but there's like movement and it's really loud coming through. So
okay, I'll be still. It's probably me. Well, no, what I was going to say is that you know how they talk about grooming and how a child molester grooms. The way that I was groomed is this man ripped off the head of a chicken and stuck it in my face. And the body of the chicken was running around, out on the ground and everything. That was how I was groomed. When you're little and you have this bloody chicken head stuck in your face, I will never forget how traumatized I was from that. And then after that, and see, in my head, it clicked in my head what he was telling me. It was basically his way of telling me, I could do this to you.
Yep.
And then when he wasn't twisting, he twisted the head off of that chicken. But sometimes he would cut the head off of the chicken. And it was always just like a little reminder. But
wow.
My first memory of him actually molesting me was his wife had gone to the grocery store and he pushed me in the bathroom. And it probably wasn't the first time he molested me. It's just, like I remember this. But so I know that he had his pants down. I know that he was, trying to force me to give him oral sex and everything. And I was crying and I was fighting him. And then the next thing, his wife is standing at the bathroom door and she's beating on the door and she's saying, Melvin, let her out of there. Melvin, let her out of there. And then, of course, I went, full force, screaming. And so I got out of there. Well, he's pulling his pants up and everything on his way out. It was not an unusual thing for her.
No. And we've seen that time and again. I mean, God, I struggle for words to even describe them, but these spouses, whatever you want to call them, wives, partners, are aiding and abetting everything that's going on. I mean, they're in on it. They know what's going on. They assist in the abuse of their own children, or it's just, for most people, it's beyond even comprehension. But,
well, there's definitely a gross ignorance there,
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's what we try to overcome in stories such as yourself. I mean, that if that doesn't let people know that this is happening in your town right now, there are men and women involved in it, and there are married couples that are doing this to children, and couples that are just living together, and you name it. So yeah, that's why I think your story and the stories of these survivors are so valuable, because it chips away at that dissonance that people just don't want to believe that this is even possible. But we've made a lot of progress. So,
well, the thing is that there's like an unending supply, and they're everywhere I turn in my life. I mean, and in my family, and this is something that Howard and I haven't really talked about, is there's multi-generational abuse. My daughter was abused. And, I mean, Howard, I know he knows that, but we have
I know, yes, I do. Yes, I do.
And for someone to get past me and abuse my child, they are someone. And I'm telling you, because I didn't, I was not careless with my children. I watched after them. I talked to my children. I told them, and still someone hurt my child. That's a whole nother show.
Yeah. And you come back. This is going to be 2 parts, and you come back as many times as you feel necessary, because we'll have you on every time, because all these aspects need to be fleshed out. But yeah,
it's not nice, and it's not pretty, and it's really humiliating to a degree, except where I won't take ownership of it, because it's not mine to own. But there is so much growth, degradation, but one thing I will tell you is there's like a common thread in child molesters. They want the person that they are harming to feel like they are nothing. They want them to feel as though they are less than nothing. And so that's something that a person who has to deal with that, they will deal with that. That is something that they never, ever accomplished with me.
No.
Now,
and I think, and I just want to jump in real quick, because I think, you talk about this Melvin, and he, if you looked him up in the if you looked up pedophile in the dictionary, he's what would, show up. And, we know how to, I think I know how to recognize the pedo smile. It's a bit of a smirk. There's a look in the eye. There's things to look for. But as you go through, the stories of people that are doing this to children, it's not, there is no stereotype. It's in all walks of life, men, women, doing it to boys and girls.
That's true, Howard. That's very true. And
yeah,
I shouldn't have said that. I probably
no. Right. No, because we have that. Yeah, we have that image, and we that guy, the creepy janitor, the whatever, like we know what that guy is, and they're not hiding it, but we've come to realize, wait a second, man, they're everywhere. You thought maybe you look out for the creepy person, but you can't look out for the creepy person.
You have to look out for everybody.
I never thought of this. I just now dawned on me. He had a white panel truck.
And what struck me when you were speaking too, and we've covered this too, is the multi-generational aspect of this, and what we found through experience and research, that they are grooming these kids in prep schools. They're grooming them in public schools. It's on every level of our society. Okay, and that's what they do. These kids are abused, and it seems like half of them turn into survivors that help other victims and overcome the abuse, and the other half turn into victimizers and predators. And I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if that's the breakdown, but I have seen that over and over again. And most of these pedophile abusers were themselves abused. And there's people like you and Becky and the other survivors that have been on the show, Missy and V, and they turn that corner, and they don't become abusers. They become survivors, and they help, victims of this and other survivors of it. And it's just, but that is such a good point, and that people need to realize, and it's no respecter of status, of religion, we've seen it everywhere, every level of our society worldwide. So that's such a, and I think that helps people break through this dissonance, cognitive dissonance that they have about the subject, when they start to realize that this is everywhere. It's in every organization, from police, fire department, Boy Scouts, USA Gymnastics. I listened to a couple hours of the victim impact statements today. I don't know if you guys got a chance to do that from Larry Nasser, but that's a great.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a great point that I just wanted to emphasize. But because this is multi-generational, and it repeats. So
yes, it does. Yes. Well, for myself, I feel like that I experienced both ends of the spectrum. I experienced the single mother where the babysitter's husband was the molester. Then I experienced the stepfather who was assistant police chief of the town that we lived in, and we had boatloads of money. And he never molested me, but it was his everyday effort to try. And every day that I spent with him, from the time I was 9 years old until I was 19 and left the state, it was his agenda in life to jack me up one way or another. And I'll talk about that at a different time, but I just feel like that I have experienced both ends of the spectrum, and there's no difference. They're all cowards, they're all abusers, and
getting back to this, Melvin. How long was his wife? Your babysitter.
Probably about 5 years.
Okay, so did the abuse go? Was it like on a regular basis, or every time, or
all the time?
So you knew. So 5, 6, 7. You knew when you were going over there, he was going to do this to you. And his wife was around, or she was always going to the grocery store?
She was around. I mean, the garage was the main place. She didn't go out in the garage. She wasn't going to go out there. She knew what would happen.
But she knew.
Of course she knew.
Now,
tell me this guy's dead, please.
He is. Yeah, he is dead now.
When other people have been on, I don't get into, I don't like get into like too much of the specifics. But I know, Catherine's, she's able to talk about this, which, just, it's, just blew my mind, when she, when I met her, the fact, that she is able to, recall this without, in a very calm manner. And it's just, so.
Well, let me say this, Howard, and I've said this to you, but let me say this to your audience. I was in my mid-20s when I allowed myself to recognize that child that was abused when they were younger. And I was telling you about this earlier today. Something had happened, and I saw something about childhood sexual abuse. And in my head, there was a door that cracked open, and in my head, it said, nope, that wasn't me. And I slammed that door. Well, then in the next few days, that door kind of creaked back open, and I had to sit down with myself. I did a lot of praying, and I had to come to terms. And so in my mid-20s was when I recognized that. But up until that very time, I would have not even recognized that I had been molested when I was a child. That's how locked off and locked up that it was. It was locked. And
Yeah.
even
Miss-
now,
So in your
there
so in
are
your
users
in
that
your
are locked.
teens, you didn't recognize it.
Huh?
In your teens, you didn't recognize it.
No.
Okay.
Well, and I think we've
Teen
found.
Howard, when I was in my teens, I was facing my stepfather, and
That's what I was going to say. You were more
day.
right. You're right.
Defending yourself. Yeah, you've been and Missy went into this really well, the PTSD aspect of this, and it's like extreme PTSD where it's a survival mechanism that the brain cannot, as a 5-year-old child to, obviously for 5 years, this is something that as a protective mechanism, the brain buries this, and I don't think it's uncommon for a lot of survivors to not even have these memories until they're in their 20s or sometimes 30s. And that's an area that we need to work on with law enforcement, that when these memories are recovered at whatever time they're recovered, and I think we're making some progress with that, that's when the clock starts on and a lot of these charges, in a lot of states, and that needs to be standardized too, that there needs to be no statute of limitations on any of these crimes. So, but we're working on it. But yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon. I've heard that story over and over again, and actually know people that I was involved with that these memories did not, something happened when they were in their 20s and the memories came back, and like you said, a door cracks open, and that's when you start to deal with it. But in my mind, anyway, you've done an awful lot of work, and obviously, have you had therapy over these issues?
When I found out that my daughter had been molested, I went to a therapist.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Because it seems pretty obvious that you've had good therapy and you've done a lot of work, because to be able to talk about the things that you're talking about, that just says. And I come from the recovery from addiction type standpoint, but there's so much work, and it's all trauma, whatever area. And a lot of people with addiction have, myself included, had molestation, issues. And I haven't really shared too much about that. I share that with, anybody that's a survivor that's going to come on the program. But it was an isolated incident for me. But I tell you what, and obviously the level, and I don't, because it was like an isolated incident, and everybody I've come into contact with, their stories are just so much worse than what happened to me. Not that it was, I was 15 years old. It was there was alcohol involved and a guy, and it happened. But I'll tell you what, the work that I had to do on that, and that was one incident. I can't even imagine the work that you've had to do to be able to even talk about stuff like that. But it's evident in talking to you. So I just want to. Well, that's my 2 cents on that.
If I could, and this is rough for survivors, but honestly, conditioning is involved in that. One incident can be so traumatizing for someone, and whereas someone who has experienced the trauma for years, there's like a conditioning to it. Sad but true.
Yeah. Missy explains that so well with this. It's extreme PTSD, and it's like somebody that's been tortured in a prisoner of war camp for 10 years, or 15 years. It's just it's on a level that is just it's just amazing. And all of you have these same qualities. You V, Missy, Becky. I mean, I see it as angelic to have survived the trauma that you've obviously survived, and to be able to communicate and help others that have been through the same thing. It's the only adjective that I can come up with is angelic. So that's the best part of doing it, because a lot of this, and from being through it, is very dark stuff. But the experience we've had with survivors is just beautiful, So you're an angel.
Catherine, you were telling a story about the picture that you sent that we used in the promo about cutting your hair.
Oh yeah, Well, that's one of the things that I was thinking about also when we were talking, is that I did not consciously think about the molestation when it wasn't happening. If it wasn't happening, I didn't think about it otherwise. But I do remember this time going to the beauty shop with my mother, and I said I want my hair cut off because I had really long hair down to my waist, and he would use my hair to control my head for oral sex. And I mean, the fight of, he was a big man with big hands, and I had really long hair, and I mean, you can just imagine the struggle and the fight. Well, when I went to the beauty shop, I cut my hair off. And I mean, it was just like a pixie cut. And nobody could believe that I would do that. My mom was like, "Why are you cutting your hair off?" I mean, it was a big, long conversation before I said, "No, I'm cutting it off." And my school picture, after I had my hair cut off, you will see the biggest smile on my face and the biggest smile in my eyes because I got over on him. And I was probably about 9 or 10.
You were even that sharp back then. That's.
So, Catherine, how did you get away from Melvin? How did that come about?
My mother married my stepfather, so I went from the actively child molester to the not quite so.
Just a potential child molester. Would that be fair? Or
no.
or one
it's a complicated. Well, it's a complicated. Getting told. From what she's told me about her stepfather, it was.
He started out
like a psychological. Would you call it like a psychological molesting, rape?
It's always a psychological thing with the perpetrators. They're always running a game. They're very actively running a game because they've always got to be thinking ahead. But with him, he first started dating my mother, and we would go visit him at his house, and we would sit on his lap for some reason. I don't even know why my mother would allow that, but me and my sister would pile on his lap all the time. Well, he was sitting there with an erection, pressing it against our bottoms all the time.
Jesus, and that's Billy Joe Snell, this guy.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Police officer.
Right.
Seminole County Sheriff's deputy.
Yeah.
Assistant police chief, right?
He was assistant police chief. It doesn't say that in his obituary because of when he was assistant police chief, he was fired for misconduct, sexual misconduct, and then he fought the firing, and they had to they were going to reinstate him, but they weren't going to reinstate him as assistant police chief, so he didn't take the reinstatement. But that's why I'm sure that they did not put assistant police chief in his obituary because of that.
Catherine,
leave that out. You mean like the other police departments? They just don't say much about it, and the guy transfers to another police department in another state and continues to rape kids. Something like that.
Right.
I've never asked you. Could you talk about your mother a little bit, and because a lot of people would say well, if my daughter was going to a babysitter and coming back, I would have to sense something. Something's wrong.
Well, and one more point I just want to make really quick. That guy is molesting you. That's not a potential molestation. If you're sitting on his lap and he has an erection, that's sexual assault. So,
yeah. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Howard, let me go back to when I was younger with my mother, because I didn't know how to say anything, but I would act out horribly. And I told you about the incident. My mother, she was really proud of her little house. She was becoming independent, newly single, blah, blah, blah. And she had all of her friends come over, and they were doing a painting party. They painted the whole inside of our house, and there were, a bunch of people there, kids, everything else, just having a great time. The whole entire house had been painted on the inside, and we had lunch. So we had hot dogs for lunch. I went and got behind this chair, and I took my hot dog, and I bit it. And I took the hot dog, and I started making little grease circles on the wall behind the chair. I made all kinds of grease circles on the wall behind the chair. And someone saw me do that, and they're like, what in the world did you do that for? And I remember my mom, she came and pulled the chair out, and she flipped out. She's like, oh, my God, see, this is what I'm talking about. She does stuff like this all the time. What is wrong with her? Why in the world would she do that? And I just sat there with my hot dog. But I would do, different things. Like one time I got Child Protective Services called on us because I acted out so badly. And so whenever a child gets Child Protective Services called on your house, you're really, really, really pissed off at that child. Trust me. And, my mom was not abusive. She was not neglectful or crazy or anything like that. She was just living her life, and nobody thought of freaking child molesters back then. And
different generation, a different generation.
Yeah, and so
I think a lot of that still goes on today because we don't want to talk about what has happened. The average person. Even in my world, every day, my immediate family knows, what I'm focused on, and they can't listen to it. They can't hear it. They know it. So it's, if you don't hear it and you close your eyes and you don't see it, it doesn't exist. And I guess, even right down to, if it's happening, that close to you, most people, it's just too much to deal with. But, the more, obviously the more we talk about it and we have to get people like, hey, you need to be aware. We came up with this little thing called, stranger danger, stranger danger. Well, it's not stranger danger. It's anyone danger.
Yeah, true.
And mostly, I don't know, and I know you've got a bunch of great statistics, but I would think statistically the chances are a family member, much greater that this is being done by a family member or somebody that knows the family rather than a stranger.
Statistically, a child molester will molest their friend's child before they molest their own. Yeah. Statistically.
Yeah. But,
so it's actually more dangerous to be a friend to a child molester than it is to be a family member to one.
Even an uncle or a cousin or,
Well, Howard, that's a statistic, and how, I don't know how they gathered them or, what criteria that they
the FBI, they don't keep statistics on it.
Right. But family members obviously, tend to have more access,
the worst possible crime on the face of the earth, other than murdering somebody, and you're murdering their spirit. But our premier law enforcement agency that's supposed to be the best in the world doesn't even keep statistics on this. That's disgusting.
Well, the reason that they don't is because then everyone would be in panic mode. And let me tell you another thing that I believe that the government does to cover their behinds when it comes to statistics. They changed Child Protective Services from CPS to DHS and FFF and XFF.
Yep.
They changed them to different names. Then how's anybody going to collect statistics on them? Just the general old Joe. They're not.
Yeah. And they don't. It's so messed up, and there's so many levels to this. But they definitely don't want to call it what they're actually supposed to be doing. That they would rather call it Department of Children and Families than Protective Services, because then people say you're supposed to be protecting children. So I think there's a few states that still call it Child Protective Services, but we've got all these morphs of what should be a standardized, and that's what it should be called, Child Protective Services. Nationwide.
If it's called Child Protective Services, it should be called Child Protective Services across the board in the whole union, and statistics should be taken. Every last dadgum one of them. Then they're going to find out how many of those kids that they lose.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, and I'm sure you will, to become involved with our support group on Facebook. But what we found, too, which is just as alarming, but really not that surprising, that these child, and Nancy Schaefer was murdered over trying to expose this, the senator in Georgia. But we're finding that it's like Department of Children and Families, or whatever they're called, are targeting children of survivors of child sexual abuse. Because everyone I've come in contact with, and I don't believe in coincidences,
Neither do I.
They're survivors, and all of a sudden, wow, their children are being ripped away by a judge or that agency, and I believe they're targeting them. It's and of course, not everybody in those professions are, I don't think are even aware of this. There are a lot of people that they're good people, just like our law enforcement, just like the FBI. There's a lot of, but there is a network, and we found out it's in our schools, it's everywhere, that are targeting survivors of child sexual abuse. They're targeting their children, and that
Catherine remembers. She remembers when I was more involved in the Grace Packer situation. I used to talk to her all the time, and she really helped me, remain relatively calm. Catherine, do you remember when I was telling you that I first of all, I called one of the agencies, and it was initially it was difficult finding them, because I don't know, it wasn't like CPS or DHS, and it changes even in Pennsylvania. It changes from county to county. But I called the one place, and I was given that Grace Packer was involved in, and they didn't want to hear, they didn't want to take any phone calls, and they were giving me the runaround. And finally, I just kept calling back, and I said, well, do you have statistics on how many, of children that you've taken from homes, how many are placed? And they didn't have, we don't keep those statistics. And I don't know if you remember that story, but I'm like, what do you mean you don't have any statistics? Pop it into a computer. You've taken X amount from the home. How many have been temporary, and how many have been reunited with their families? And they couldn't give me that number. I just wanted, but I was more of a plug to you of how much you were always there for me, during the, the Grace Packer, because it's such an awful case.
It is. And I think that's a really good example of just exactly what John is talking about, because look how many children were taken just from two women in that family.
And the truth needs to come out. And I'm telling you, when it does, these people, there's going to be no place on this earth that they can hide, because the people that are involved in
there's no three letters that they can hide under.
No. Well, and there'll be no lawyer that will be able to help them, and they'll be lucky if they're not taken out and like George W. Herbert Walker Bush said, strung up from the nearest lamppost. If we find out, and another generational pedophile.
Well, I know that we're just about out of time here, but since
yes,
we're talking about crime and punishment, my idea is, and I don't know if I've run this by you before, Howard, but my idea is Pedophile Island.
Yes. Yeah, we talked about that.
And it's an island of no return. And it's also, it's a self-sufficient island. Once you get on that island, you do not get off. And whatever your occupation is, that's what you're going to do on that island. You better hope for it, because y'all are responsible. And if all your chickens die, guess what? You'll never get another chicken in your life.
Yeah.
And
did you guys see Papillon?
No.
Well, it's about an old the penal colony in French Guiana. They were a satellite of France, and that's where they used to send just all their regular criminals. But I think that's available, and it's exactly what it's like there. I mean, it's swampy. You know, they have other little islands that they marooned these guys on, and yeah, what a great idea. Check out Papillon and see if that would fit your.
Then that island would be guarded by drones, because I think that enough lives have been ruined. They don't need to be out there guarding that island to make sure some pedophile doesn't get off that island. That island will be guarded by drones, and if you try to get off that island, you're going to die. You're going to get shot right between the eyes by a drone.
Well, Catherine, we did talk about this, but my version of it was a bit of more of a Survivor type, TV show, and where it's on, closed circuit cameras 24/7, and you're watching, and basically it's like you watch them, like more of a Lord of the Flies kind of thing, and
No, they need to go on that island and go away. We don't need to, watch them. They do need to be on closed circuit TV just so we can keep an eye on things. But not so we can, watch them like they're some.
And before we get to John, I just want to say, because Catherine actually, what is this? You believe that there's a predilection to pedophilia, and I believe you told me 1 in 7.
1 in 7. 1 in 7 men statistically has a predilection towards pedophilia.
1 in 7 men.
That sounds about right. That sounds about right. It's an epidemic. It's
beyond epidemic. It's pandemic.
Yeah. Pandemic. Yeah. Yes.
And now people, they are talking about it, and they are making waves, and I just encourage them to make more waves. And even the smallest thing, it really does make a difference. One phone call, one letter, one email, one tweet, one Facebook post, they all make a difference.
Absolutely.
Everybody add your voice.
I can't wait for part 2, and we're about to get caught by the music. Thank you so much, Catherine, and I'm just enthralled, and I will be looking forward to Thursday night, and we may be another show after that, because it seems like you have so much to say and such a great message. So thank you so much. Before the music comes in and cuts us off, I just wanted to say that.
Well, thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to be able to say some things that are on my heart, in a bigger way. So thanks, guys, and I'll talk to you soon, and I will talk to you.
Well, stay on the line, Catherine.
Okay.
That's Thursday with part 2.
Part 2.